Hello everyone, welcome to Wicked West Books. I am Meg West, and today I want to have a discussion with you on the topic of epic fantasy versus high fantasy, and what causes me to categorize them differently. So this is kind of a new video for me. I haven't done any kind of discussion video on my channel before, but this subject has been kind of playing at the back of my mind for the past couple months or so, and it's something that I just kind of wanted to discuss with you. I have noticed that for me, the difference between epic fantasy and high fantasy has more to do with time period than anything else that actually happens in the story. When I mentioned this to my husband, he thought that meant the time it took me to read the book, and that is not what I meant at all. I meant time periods in the book. Like, for instance, J.R.R. Tolkien. While I classify J.R.R. Tolkien's books as epic fantasy, it is not because it took me 3 months to read just The Hobbit. The thing that causes me to look at a book and think epic fantasy more than high fantasy has to do with the way that the book develops. In most books, such as Mistborn, there is a set deadline to the events that need to happen in the book. And it usually only takes place over a few weeks, sometimes even just a couple of months, and it's a very fast approaching deadline that they have to solve everything by. And the books themselves kind of give off the illusion that they need every single second between the time they find out that the deadline is there and the time that they get there, and it has a rush kind of sense of we are working our way there actively and thinking about it every second of the book. Versus in books such as The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, which I don't own, The Belgariad by David Eddings, and even The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini take their time, their ever-sweet loving time, in order to get to that point where the final clash is and the world gets kind of set back on its path to good. And while I'm a big fan of high fantasy, such as the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson, the Magister series by C.S. Friedman, the Dark Jewels series by Anne Bishop, the Dragon Riders of Pern series by Anne McCaffrey, the Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. There are books that are epic fantasy that I have started and never finished, such as The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, The Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson, even though I absolutely love Brandon Sanderson. And even though I really like Eragon, I have not read the final book in the Inheritance trilogy. Add to it the fact that I absolutely love the movies. I had to force myself, and it took me 3 months to read this tiny 300-page book. And so the reason that I really classify books as epic fantasy versus high fantasy generally means whether I'm going to like it or not. Not always. The biggest exception to this kind of rule with me is The Belgariad by David Eddings. In this, you have a cast of main characters, and while there is a deadline and they're working to it, they kind of take their time, knowing that it will happen when it happens, and if we're ready, we're ready, and if we're not, we all die. And just the way that David Eddings went through this and the cast of characters, I love the cast of characters in this series, is just kind of what pulls this whole book together for me, the whole quintet, and I absolutely love it. I could read it again and again. Another epic fantasy that I actually really enjoyed is the Lon Tobin Chronicles by David B. Coe. This trilogy is amazing, and even though there is a big event that happens at the end, the way they work up to it is slow and building. Epic fantasy feels like to me is that it's slow and building and gets to the point, but it takes its time to get there. And what makes it a good epic fantasy to me is that even though it's taking its sweet time to get to that point in the future where everything resolves itself, you still feel entertained on the way. Unlike when I tried to read Lord of the Rings and I got a decent way into the book, and even though so many pages I'd gone through, they moved from a party in the town to a party in the forest, and it was not entertaining to me. I don't like The Lord of the Rings for that reason. I can watch the movies okay, and I absolutely love the Hobbit movies, but I'm not a big fan of the books. And maybe it's just because I'm not a mature enough reader to really enjoy books that take their time getting to the point. If you're going to take me on a long journey, I should be entertained the whole way along and not drag myself through a couple hundred pages for you to move from one party to another when the whole plot of the story is that you're supposed to be saving Middle-earth. And I know that that's an unpopular opinion, but it's just how I feel. So basically, I guess what I'm getting to is I read some epic fantasy, but really I just prefer when it's plain high fantasy. So yeah, that's kind of how I classify the epic and high fantasy genres. So maybe this helped you out in how you want to sort epic and high fantasy, or maybe you disagree with every single thing I said in this entire video. Either way, I would love to hear your opinion, so comment down below. And that's all I really have for this video, so I will see you guys next week. Have a wicked day.